There's a foxglove growing in an abandoned Victorian garden right now, its purple bells swaying in the breeze like something from a fairy tale. It's pretty. It's everywhere. It's also the plant that changed cardiology forever, and the same one that killed kings. That same compound, digitalis, now regulates millions of heartbeats daily through prescription digoxin. Medieval poisoners knew its power. Battlefield surgeons used it to restart failing hearts. Modern emergency rooms still depend on it. The line between medicine and poison is measured in milligrams, and most of these plants blur that line so completely that the therapeutic dose and the lethal dose are terrifyingly close. One plant on this list gave us morphine, but has claimed countless lives. Another contains compounds now used in chemotherapy, and it grows as a roadside weed. What you're about to learn will change how you look at every garden, every vacant lot, every pretty flower someone hands you at a wedding. Let's start with the plant you just pictured, foxglove, the heart thief. This tall, elegant beauty with speckled purple bells has been revered and feared for centuries. In 1785, English physician William Withering documented its use for treating dropsy, what we now call congestive heart failure. But here's what makes foxglove extraordinary and terrifying. It contains cardiac glycosides, compounds that force the heart to beat stronger and slower. The drug derived from it, digoxin, remains prescribed today for heart failure and atrial fibrillation. Yet digoxin has one of the narrowest therapeutic windows in medicine. The concentration at which it works is dangerously close to the concentration at which it kills. There's no antidote. The compound accumulates in your body. One study noted that even slight overdosage induces toxicity. Foxglove earned darker names too: dead man's bells, witch's gloves. It's a pharmacist that doesn't forgive mistakes. At weddings, you'll often see lily of the valley, the wedding day killer, tucked into bridal bouquets. The delicate white bells smell like spring itself. But this plant contains over 30 cardiac glycosides, including convalitoxin, which causes digitalis-like toxicity affecting the heart's electrical system. Every part is poisonous: leaves, flowers, berries, even the water in the vase. Case studies document child poisonings from eating the attractive red berries. Historically, European herbalists used carefully dosed preparations for heart conditions, understanding that the dose makes the poison. Modern research has identified that convalitoxin affects coagulation and can lead to dangerous blood clotting. Symptoms include irregular heartbeat, nausea, confusion, and if severe, cardiac arrest. Cats are particularly sensitive. Victorian flower language called lily of the valley a symbol of returning happiness. But those Victorians also understood its lethal potential. Its innocence wrapped around cardiac arrest. Now, here's where things get classical. Hemlock, Socrates' exit, is the plant that killed philosophy's most famous mind. In 399 BC, after being condemned by the Athenian state, Socrates drank a cup of poison hemlock juice and experienced what Plato described as a slow paralysis climbing from his feet to his heart. The active alkaloid is conine, which works by inhibiting nicotinic acetylcholine receptors, essentially severing communication between nerves and muscles. Death comes from respiratory paralysis. You suffocate while fully conscious. The terrifying part? Hemlock looks remarkably like wild carrot and parsley. People still confuse them today. The hollow stems with purple spots grow along roadsides, ditches, and disturbed ground throughout North America and Europe. 6 to 8 leaves can be lethal. Historical records from medieval medicine show attempts to use it as an antispasmodic, but its toxicity proved too unpredictable. Philosophy's most famous last drink came from a plant you might mistake for dinner. The Nightshade dynasty has produced some of history's most infamous poisons, but none more elegant than belladonna, the beautiful death. The name comes from Italian women who used drops of the plant's juice to dilate their pupils, believing larger pupils made them more attractive. Cleopatra reportedly used similar preparations. That cosmetic effect comes from atropine, which blocks muscarinic acetylcholine receptors. Today, atropine is a cornerstone of emergency medicine, used to treat bradycardia, reverse organophosphate poisoning, and dilate pupils for eye exams. The plant contains scopolamine and hyoscyamine too, all powerful anticholinergics. At therapeutic doses, these compounds are life-saving. At toxic doses, they produce the classic mad as a hatter, blind as a bat, red as a beet, hot as a hare, dry as a bone syndrome, hallucinations, fever, dilated pupils, rapid heartbeat. Historical assassinations employed belladonna because symptoms could be attributed to fever or madness. Vanity's most dangerous tool became surgery's essential. Drive through any Mediterranean climate, and you'll see oleander, the roadside executioner, lining highways and decorating gardens with its pink, red, or white blooms. It's one of the most commonly planted ornamental shrubs in warm regions. It's also one of the most toxic plants on Earth. Every part contains oleandrin, a cardiac glycoside that inhibits the sodium-potassium ATPase enzyme, just like digoxin, but with an even narrower therapeutic window. Historical accounts include suicides, accidental poisonings from using oleander branches as cooking skewers, and documented cases where a single leaf killed sheep. Modern research has explored oleandrin's ability to inhibit cancer cell growth. It can induce apoptosis in tumor cells at doses lower than its clinical toxic threshold. But the danger remains. Oleander poisoning causes severe cardiac arrhythmias, often progressing to ventricular fibrillation and death. Highway beautification hiding chemical warfare. Those 5 plants are just the beginning. Familiar faces with dark histories. Now we're moving into the ones that shaped civilization itself. These are the ancient pharmacopoeia, the plants that powered empires, killed pain, and in some cases, created it. No plant has been more loved and more hated than the opium poppy, the double-edged sword. Sumerian clay tablets from around 2100 BC reference what scholars believe is opium, making it one of humanity's oldest recorded medicines. The Sumerians called it hul-gil, the joy plant. Archaeological evidence suggests cultivation dating back to 3400 BC in Mesopotamia. The milky latex contains morphine, codeine, and thebaine, alkaloids that bind to opioid receptors, blocking pain signals with extraordinary efficiency. In 1804, Friedrich Serturner isolated morphine, launching modern pharmacology. By the Civil War, morphine was standard battlefield medicine. 400,000 soldiers became addicted. Today, opioids remain the gold standard for severe pain management and the center of a devastating crisis. As one researcher noted, morphine is hard to beat for pain control. The most loved and hated plant in medical history, medieval surgeons faced a nightmare: how to cut into conscious patients. One solution came from henbane, the truth serum, part of the soporific sponge used for surgical sleep. The plant contains scopolamine and atropine, anticholinergics that cause sedation, delirium, and amnesia. Ancient oracles reportedly used henbane to induce prophetic states. The fumes supposedly contributed to the visions at the Oracle of Delphi. Today, scopolamine survives in motion sickness patches and as a pre-anesthetic medication. But henbane's history is darker than pharmacy. It was a component of witches' flying ointments and was used for centuries in interrogations because of its tendency to produce compliant, confused states. The mechanism is anticholinergic. Blocking acetylcholine produces hallucinations, confusion, and suggestibility. Overdose can cause seizures and death. The original anesthesiologist, unreliable but revolutionary. South Carolina chose yellow jasmine, the Confederate killer, as its state flower, a pretty ornamental with trumpet-shaped yellow blooms. It's also highly toxic. The plant contains gelsomina, an alkaloid that acts on glycine receptors in the central nervous system, causing respiratory paralysis. Historical records document child deaths from sucking nectar from the flowers. Research has explored gelsomine for pain relief. It shows promise in animal models for neuropathic pain, but the therapeutic window is dangerously narrow. Symptoms of poisoning include drooping eyelids, difficulty speaking and swallowing, and progressive paralysis. There's no specific antidote. Treatment is supportive, focused on maintaining breathing. The plant blooms in early spring throughout the southeastern United States, often climbing fences and trees. Southern charm with a lethal handshake. Deep in eastern North American forests, you'll find a plant with an umbrella-like leaf and a single white flower, the mayapple, the tumor hunter. Native American healers used preparations from its rhizomes to treat warts and tumors for centuries. Modern science validated this traditional use. The plant contains podophyllitoxin, a compound that inhibits cell division by disrupting microtubule formation. From this single compound, chemists developed etoposide and tenofovir, chemotherapy drugs now used against lung cancer, testicular cancer, leukemia, and lymphoma. The irony is sharp. The raw plant is highly toxic, causing severe gastrointestinal damage and even death. But refined and targeted, it saves lives. Traditional herbalists applied it topically for skin growths, never internally. That traditional wisdom proved prophetic. Forest floor pharmacy feeding oncology wards. Monkshood grows in gardens for its striking blue-purple flower spikes, but its other name tells the real story. Aconite, the queen of poisons. Arrow poisons across cultures from Asia to Europe used aconite extracts. The primary alkaloid, aconitine, affects voltage-gated sodium channels in nerve and muscle cells, causing potentially fatal cardiac arrhythmias. There is no antidote. Historical assassinations employed aconite because it could be masked in food, and its symptoms, numbness, weakness, cardiac failure, mimicked natural illness. Even handling the plant without gloves can cause numbness and tingling. Research explored aconitine derivatives for pain relief. It's extraordinarily potent, but toxicity proved insurmountable for mainstream use. The therapeutic window is essentially non-existent. One toxicology text noted the gap between the effective dose and the lethal dose is negligible. Beautiful blue hood hiding a chemical weapon. In 1676, British soldiers stationed near Jamestown, Virginia, ate a plant during a food shortage and descended into days of wild delirium. That plant was jimsonweed, the devil's trumpet, and it remains a regular presence in emergency rooms today. Datura stramonium contains atropine, scopolamine, and hyoscyamine in concentrations that vary wildly from plant to plant, making any dose unpredictable. Traditional shamanic use across cultures employed the plant for vision quests, but the line between revelation and death was thin. The anticholinergic syndrome it produces includes vivid hallucinations of ordinary objects, people who aren't there, insects crawling on skin, along with amnesia, fever, and potentially fatal cardiac effects. Modern poison control centers handle jimsonweed cases regularly, usually teenagers seeking a cheap high. A clinical review noted that patients often remember nothing of the experience. The plant that shows you things you can't unsee. One of medicine's most important anticoagulants came from an accident involving sweet clover, the rat poison ancestor. In the 1920s, cattle in North America began dying mysteriously from uncontrollable bleeding. Veterinary researchers traced the deaths to sweet clover hay that had spoiled. The culprit was dicumarol, formed when the plant's natural coumarins fermented. This compound blocks vitamin K, essential for blood clotting. Researchers at the Wisconsin Alumni Research Foundation synthesized a more potent version and called it warfarin, now one of the most prescribed blood thinners worldwide, preventing strokes and treating deep vein thrombosis. The same compound, at higher doses, became the world's most common rat poison. The therapeutic window is narrow enough that patients on warfarin require regular blood monitoring. A chemical accident in moldy hay saves stroke patients daily. Amazon hunters dipped arrow tips in a paste made from curare plants, the Amazonian anesthesia, creating paralytic poisons that immobilized prey without contaminating the meat. The active compound, tubocurarine, blocks acetylcholine at neuromuscular junctions, causing paralysis but not unconsciousness. Victims remain fully aware as their muscles fail. European explorers brought curare back, and by the 1940s, anesthesiologists had adapted it for surgery. Tubocurarine became the first neuromuscular blocker used in operating rooms, allowing surgeons to work on relaxed muscles. Modern successors like vecuronium and rocuronium are safer but work identically. Without muscle relaxants derived from curare research, modern surgery, especially abdominal and thoracic procedures, would be far more dangerous. the jungle weapon that became the surgeon's scalpel. Those 8 plants shaped medical history from battlefields to operating tables. But now we're entering the legendary ones, plants whose power seemed almost supernatural until science explained why. These are the compounds that spawned modern oncology and the drugs that changed survival rates from death sentences to manageable diagnoses. In 1962, a USDA botanist named Arthur Barclay collected bark from a Pacific yew tree in Washington state's Gifford-Pinchot National Forest. That sample would become Taxol, the cancer tree. Researchers at the National Cancer Institute found the bark was cytotoxic. It killed cancer cells. By 1971, they had isolated and named the compound paclitaxel. The mechanism was extraordinary. While previous drugs stopped cancer by preventing cell division, paclitaxel stabilizes microtubules, essentially locking cancer cells mid-division. Clinical trials showed 30% of patients with advanced ovarian cancer responded to treatment. Today, paclitaxel treats breast, ovarian, lung, pancreatic, and other cancers. It's on the WHO's list of essential medicines. The Pacific yew grows slowly, and initial production nearly endangered the species. It took roughly 13,000 trees worth of bark to produce 8 kilograms of drug. Scientists eventually developed semi-synthetic production from related used needles. Old-growth forest hiding oncology's breakthrough. The autumn crocus blooms in fall, pushing purple flowers from the ground without leaves. An unsettling sight that earned it names like Naked Lady. But colchicum, the gout destroyer, contains a compound documented for over 3,500 years. Egyptian medical papyri describe using autumn crocus for joint swelling. The active alkaloid, colchicine, inhibits cell division by disrupting microtubule formation and powerfully reduces inflammation. It remains a first-line treatment for acute gout attacks today, but colchicine's therapeutic window is treacherously narrow. Deaths from overdose occur because the toxic dose is close to the effective dose, and symptoms don't appear immediately, so people keep taking more. Signs include severe gastrointestinal distress, multi-organ failure, and death. A clinical text noted that colchicine poisoning is particularly dangerous because the onset of symptoms is delayed. Egyptian medicine that still stumps modern alternatives. The castor bean plant is a striking ornamental with star-shaped leaves and spiky red seed pods. It's also the source of ricin, the bioweapon, one of the deadliest natural toxins known. Castor oil is gentle, used as a laxative and industrial lubricant. But the waste mash after oil extraction is approximately 5% ricin by weight. Ricin works by stopping protein synthesis. The A chain of the toxin cleaves a specific bond in ribosomal RNA, and once ribosomes can't make proteins, cells die. As little as 5 to 10 micrograms per kilogram can be lethal by injection or inhalation. The most famous case, Bulgarian dissident Georgy Markov, assassinated in London in 1978 when a modified umbrella fired a ricin-filled pellet into his thigh. He died within 4 days. There is no antidote. The toxin has been developed as a biological weapon and appeared in multiple terrorist plots. Pharmacy and bioterrorism from the same seed. An attractive pink-flowered plant grows wild in Madagascar and has been cultivated worldwide as an easy ornamental. But Catharanthus roseus, the leukemia answer, transformed pediatric oncology. Traditional Madagascan healers made teas from its leaves to treat diabetes. When researchers in the 1950s tested those extracts, they found something unexpected. The tea dramatically reduced white blood cell counts. For diabetics, this was irrelevant. For leukemia patients, whose bodies produce wildly excessive white blood cells, it was transformative. Scientists isolated 2 alkaloids, vincristine and vinblastine. Both disrupt microtubule formation, preventing cancer cells from dividing. Vincristine became a cornerstone of childhood acute lymphoblastic leukemia treatment. Before its introduction, survival rates for this cancer were roughly 10%. Today, with modern protocols including vincristine, survival exceeds 90%. The Madagascar periwinkle has saved thousands of children's lives. Roadside flower that changed pediatric oncology. The final legendary plant isn't a plant at all. Ergot, the Salem specter, is a fungus that infects rye and other grains, forming dark purple-black sclerotia that contains some of the most potent alkaloids in nature, including lysergic acid, the precursor to LSD. Throughout the Middle Ages, ergot caused epidemics of St. Anthony's fire, outbreaks where entire villages experienced burning sensations, hallucinations, convulsions, and gangrene as blood vessels constricted and limbs blackened. Some historians, beginning with Linda Caporale in 1976, proposed that ergot-contaminated rye may have triggered the bizarre behaviors at the Salem witch trials. The theory remains controversial but compelling. The symptoms match. Modern medicine isolated ergotamine from ergot, now used to treat migraine headaches. LSD was synthesized from ergot alkaloids in 1938. Albert Hofmann's accidental discovery came from research on this medieval plague. Grain contamination that birthed both madness and medicine. We've traveled through 20 plants now, from garden ornamentals to forest understories to fungal infections of grain. Each one carries the same lesson, articulated 5 centuries ago by the Renaissance physician Paracelsus. The dose makes the poison. Digitalis becomes digoxin. Poppy latex becomes morphine. Curare becomes surgical muscle relaxants. Pacific Yew becomes chemotherapy. The same compounds that kill at one concentration heal at another. Modern toxicology was built on these plants. The pharmaceutical industry owes its existence to them. Every chemistry of receptor binding, every understanding of cellular mechanisms began with observing what plants did to bodies. We forgot the danger as we refined the medicine. We packaged it in pills and assumed the wildness had been tamed. But every pharmacy counter contains these same tamed killers. Think back to that foxglove in the abandoned garden from the beginning. Purple bells swaying, pretty enough for a bouquet, deadly enough to stop a heart. Now you see it differently. You see the cardiac glycosides inside, the narrow therapeutic window, the centuries of use and misuse. That perception shift is the point. Walk through any landscape now, roadside, garden, vacant lot, forest floor, and you're walking through a pharmacy and an armory. The oleander lining the highway, the hemlock by the creek, the autumn crocus pushing through fall leaves, the periwinkle in the flower bed. Each one carries compounds that science spent centuries understanding and refining. The plants were never innocent. They evolved these chemicals for their own purposes. Defense, signaling, survival. We learned to use them. Sometimes we learned the hard way. The pharmacy was always there. You just didn't know the language. The ditch you walk past tomorrow will look the same. The vacant lot. The sidewalk crack where something green pushes through. But now you see what your grandparents knew and what emergency medicine depends upon. The most powerful medicines and the deadliest poisons often share the same root. The difference is knowledge. The difference is dose. The difference is respect for what's been hiding in plain sight all along.